What if I told you that the very first presidential election in the United States had no political parties? George Washington won in a landslide, and candidates didn't even bother campaigning. And wait until you hear how one of the most famous elections in history led to a duel to the death. Stick around because we're diving into the wild and ever-changing world of US presidential elections, from founding fathers to 21st century social media tactics. The early elections, 1789 to 1824. All right, let's start back in 1789 with the original founding father, George Washington. Elected unanimously, Washington ran without any competition, but that was a time before political parties existed in the US, which is hard to imagine today, right? No fiery debates, no negative ads, just a straightforward choice, Washington. Washington hated the idea of political parties, believing they'd tear the young country apart. But like it or not, factions began forming during his presidency. By the time John Adams took over in 1796, we had the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans. This election was like the first taste of partisan politics, with Adams representing the Federalists and Thomas Jefferson the Democratic Republicans. It set a tone that has never gone away. Now, fast forward to 1800, and things get a lot more interesting. This was the election of Thomas Jefferson versus John Adams, a fierce political rivalry that ended in what we call the Revolution of 1800. For the first time in history, power peacefully transferred from one political party to another. But get this, the drama didn't end on election day. The House of Representatives had to break a tie between Jefferson and his own running mate, Aaron Burr, and it took 36 ballots. Burr wasn't happy, and years later he shot Alexander Hamilton in a famous duel. Talk about tension. The rise of political parties and popular vote, 1824 to 1860. By 1824, things got more democratic. Or did they? This election was one for the ages. Andrew Jackson, the war hero, won the most popular and electoral votes, but didn't get a majority. The decision went to the House of Representatives, where John Quincy Adams struck a corrupt bargain with Henry Clay, who threw his support behind Adams. People were furious, and Jackson spent the next 4 years rallying support, using a new populist style of campaigning that included slogans, barbecues, and rallies. In 1828, he came back with a vengeance and won, starting what's often called the Age of the Common Man. Then came the emergence of the Whig Party, and soon after, the Republicans in the 1850s, as the nation fractured over issues like slavery. The election of 1860 was a breaking point. Abraham Lincoln's victory without a single southern state led directly to the Civil War. The stakes were so high that some southern states didn't even put Lincoln on the ballot. Imagine a country so divided that an election caused states to secede. Lincoln's presidency, marked by his Emancipation Proclamation and re-election in 1864 during wartime, cemented his legacy as one of America's most significant leaders. The Gilded Age and Progressive Era, 1868 to 1920. Post-Civil War elections were just as wild. We entered the Gilded Age, where political machines like New York's Tammany Hall controlled votes through bribery and intimidation. Corruption was rampant, but it wasn't all shady dealings. The election of 1896, for example, saw William Jennings Bryan giving over 500 speeches in 27 states, while his opponent, William McKinley, pioneered the Front Porch Campaign, speaking to supporters from his own home. And then came the Progressive Era. Teddy Roosevelt, one of the most colorful figures in American history, stormed onto the scene. In 1904, he won easily, but by 1912, he had split from the Republican Party and ran as a third-party candidate with the Bull Moose Party. The result? He split the Republican vote and handed the presidency to Democrat Woodrow Wilson. Oh, and remember, Teddy got shot during a campaign speech and still finished his speech before seeking medical attention. Now that's commitment. The modern era begins, 1920 to 1945. The 1920s saw the rise of mass media campaigns, with radio broadcasts changing the game. Then came Franklin D. Roosevelt, who mastered this new medium. The Great Depression and World War II made his presidency a defining era. FDR's fireside chats over the radio gave Americans a sense of comfort during hard times. His 4 terms in office led to the 22nd Amendment, limiting future presidents to just 2 terms. Speaking of pivotal moments, the 1948 election deserves a mention. Harry Truman, the underdog, pulled off a stunning upset against Thomas Dewey. Everyone thought Dewey would win, even leading to the famous Dewey defeats Truman headline. Truman's whistle-stop campaign tours were legendary, and his fiery speeches connected with everyday Americans. The television era, 1945 to 2000. In 1960, the first televised debate between John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon marked a turning point. Kennedy looked young, confident and charismatic, while Nixon appeared tired and sweaty. It changed how Americans viewed presidential candidates forever. Image became just as important as ideas. Skipping ahead to 1980, Ronald Reagan, a former actor, knew how to use this to his advantage. His Morning in America campaign was a masterclass in messaging and image. Meanwhile, in 1992, Bill Clinton played the saxophone on the Arsenio Hall show and appealed to a new generation of voters. The idea of a cool president became part of the narrative. The internet and social media age, 2000 present. The 21st century brought us the digital age. The 2000 election between George W. Bush and Al Gore was a nail-biter, with the Supreme Court deciding the outcome. Then came Barack Obama in 2008, whose campaign revolutionized fundraising and outreach through social media. Suddenly, platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube became vital tools for reaching voters. The election of 2016 took it to another level. Donald Trump's tweets made headlines daily, sparking global debates and reshaping how candidates engage with the public. And the 2020 election saw Joe Biden and Trump battling it out in the middle of a pandemic, with mail-in voting, record turnout, and debates held in the age of Zoom. And after a rather strange 4 years as president, Joe Biden stepped down. And the race for the 2024 election was between former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris. Victory went to President Trump, who will now be returning to the White House for his 2nd term. Who'd have thought? From peaceful transitions to fierce rivalries, presidential elections have shaped and been shaped by the very core of American society. Who knows what the future holds? Perhaps AI will pick our presidents or virtual debates in the metaverse. Whatever comes next, one thing's for sure: the race for the White House will continue to evolve. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this trip through history, make sure to subscribe for more fascinating stories. See you in the next one.